In this game, all you have to do is answer 5 simple questions correctly to win. But what happens if you get these questions wrong?
Do you even know what a color is? It's almost like you think this is some sort of game. I honestly don't know why you're doing this.
Hey, what's up guys, it's BenBonk, and recently I entered the Wowie Game Jam 3.0. This game jam is hosted by Jonas Tyroller, and during the jam I'd be working with fellow game developer Deynum. So without further ado, let's get into it. The jam started on February 26th at 9 AM for me, and unfortunately I had virtual classes, so I wouldn't be able to work most of the day. However, during my lunch break, Deynum and I hopped on a call and started a brainstorm. The theme that was announced was Failure is Progress, with an additional focus of let's mess with the concepts of winning and losing. Shout out to Jonas, I really liked this theme, so Deynum and I started to draft out a few ideas. Eventually, I thought it'd be cool to make a game with a cheeky narrator that you can annoy, kind of like the Stanley Parable or There Is No Game. Because I'd always dreamed of making a game like this, and why not experiment in a game jam? Deynum then had the idea to make the game like a quiz show, where getting the wrong answers would take you down different paths and annoy the narrator. We both really liked this idea, so a few hours later I started working on the question system, and Deynum got to work starting on the script and possible story paths. We also thought that this idea would fit the theme pretty well, as the player can easily beat the game without failure, though the real fun would come from exploration and finding out all the little secrets. Also, winning would really just come to the player exploring the game. So I spent a few hours working on the system, and I wanted to make sure it was really easy to use and very versatile, as it'd be the backbone of our game. My plan was for there to be 2 kinds of scriptable objects, a question and an answer. Then I could input necessary data into these scriptable objects and use a different question manager script to handle this data and make it work in the scene. I also wanted the option for each question and answer to have unique audio slots for narration. After some work, I had a super basic system in place. Here, I can click this button and an audio clip will play for that answer. Then once the audio clip is finished playing, you can see this debug pop up. I then set up a basic question test with this system. As you can see, I have this question scriptable object with a spot for a question and slots for all the answers to that question. Then, there are also these answer scriptable objects that hold an answer string, an angriness level, which we plan to use later, an audio clip that would play when the answer is selected, and then the next question to go to. Now if I hit play, select an answer, and wait for some audio to play, the scene will then reload and show the next question using the next question variable. Things weren't perfect, but this was a start. Next, I worked on question audio and fixing the scene transition. These were just some small but pretty nice changes. But by then, I was getting kind of tired of working on code, so I took a break to work on some art for the game. I made 4 very simple buttons with different colors, and after importing those, things were looking much better. But by now, Deynum had a decent chunk of the main questions done, so I figured I would get to importing these questions. These questions were super simple. We wanted to make sure that basically everyone knows what the answer is, and they are kind of just common sense things, using basic math, colors, shapes as a baseline. But this is just going to be the main, simple path with not much variation. After all, failure is progress. After a while of setting things up, a few questions were in, and as you can see that the answers were pretty obvious, but that's kind of the point. You shouldn't be getting these answers wrong, or should you? I then realized that some of the questions in the game only have 2 answers, so I worked on some functionality for that, and now you can select if a question only has 2 answers, and then the question will only display 2 answers in the game. By now, I was kinda lost on what to do as Deynum was still working on the script and story flow of the game, so I just decided to create a simple start screen, and that was that. After that, Deynum was almost done with the script and questions, so I just made some more changes to the game in general, like changing the font, working on the question system to be more versatile, and giving it more customizability with things like win states and answer overrides. I also worked on a questions right system that would count the number of questions the player got right, and once the player makes it to the end of the survey, the game will showcase how many questions the player got right. By this point, we were really starting to run out of time, and this was the last full day of work for both of us. My job was mostly done, and I was really just waiting on Deynum to finish up the narration and questions, which was something we both really underestimated on how much time it would take to complete. So in the meantime, I tried to polish some things, like giving the button a click effect, finding some nice relaxing background music, and adding a hint of post-processing. Finally, Deynum started importing the narration, and we started adding these audio clips to the right questions and answers, and setting up the correct flow of questions, which was quite confusing to me as I was still kind of unfamiliar with all the paths and routes. By now, it was 9 PM for me, and the jam ended at 9 AM tomorrow, and we were nowhere close to done. So Deynum and I spent the next 3 hours straight just grinding through setting up these questions and endings. This was actually a lot of work because there were over 80 different audio clips and about 5 unique endings in the game. Also, I don't want to spoil the mysteries of the game too much, but the game has an underlying system called angriness. Every time you select a wrong answer, this angriness will increase, and if the narrator is angry, he can give you different and unique responses to your answers, which is pretty neat in my opinion, and sometimes the narrator can even take you down special paths in the game. So you can see that managing all this was quite a task. It also didn't help that there were many bugs in the game's code, and I have to admit, my code towards the end of the game jam started to get extremely messy. By the time I went to bed, the game still wasn't finished, so I woke up bright and early at 6:30 and tried my best to get some more work done. I added a few audio effects, worked on the endings, and attempted my best to understand how the game functions under the hood so I could work on it a bit more. Soon, Deynum also got up and we worked our hearts out for those next 2 hours attempting to get everything set up correctly and getting rid of the mini bugs that popped up along the way. After that grind was over, the game was finally finished and we started to build about 15 minutes before the deadline. But of course, WebGL was doing its thing and refusing to let me build, which was super stressful. Deynum on the other hand had a really slow PC and the build took something like half an hour to complete, so unfortunately we missed the deadline, but thankfully things weren't over as Jonas let us submit a bit late because of technical issues. It felt great to be finally done with this project after so much grind. Though, unfortunately, we soon realized that our game was rattled with bugs because we basically had no time to playtest, which was a shame, but at least the game was still somewhat playable and enjoyable, and people actually seemed to really like it even though that 2 of the game's paths were inaccessible and there were many glitches along the way. Later that night, Deynum and I got back to working on the game and we fixed a bunch of the issues with the game, which was nice because previously the main point of criticism was the bugs. Also, finally now, those 2 paths that I mentioned were now accessible, which created a bit more content for the game. Thanks Jonas for allowing us to fix bugs, so hopefully if you play it there shouldn't be too many issues. I also threw together this really basic itch.io page along with some promotional art, and with that said, the game was finally finished. And oh boy, this was quite a ride, especially those last 12 hours. Overall, this was a great experience. I've always wanted to make a game where you can annoy a narrator, and this game jam was the perfect opportunity. And looking back, it just makes me so happy that so many people seem to have thoroughly enjoyed this simple little game. Thanks again to Jonas for hosting, and Deynum for being my super awesome game jam partner. By the time you see this, he should have his own devlog about the game from his perspective on his channel, so make sure to check that out. And with that said, that is the end of the video. If you want to play the game, I would highly encourage you, as Deynum and I are very proud of it, and I've never made a game like this ever before. I've also tried to keep spoilers to a minimum in this video to not take away from the experience. Anyways, I hope you liked this video, and if you did, please consider leaving a like or dropping a sub. Also, make sure to wishlist my commercial game, Slime Peep on Steam, please. But I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.